Yes, then the question arises whether it can begin from physical entities or mental entities, whether it comes from mind or
It's
as
both.
far as the mutation is concerned.
It works both ways. You see, the mind and matter are not separate. One way of saying the observer is not separate from the observed. Now, you see, but the mind sets up the illusion that it is. That is, in the case of the chair, the mind can treat itself as fairly independent of the chair, right? Saying, I am here, the chair is there. The chair is not affected by my thinking about it, and I am not affected by the existence of the chair. I'm free to think of some other thing, right? Now then I say, I am angry, and I am different from the anger, right? I take the same view. I can think about anger and not think about anger. Anger doesn't really affect the straightness of my mind any more than the chair does. That's the assumption. Therefore, but in fact it does. The anger penetrates the whole system, so the mind is not straight. Therefore, the anger controls the mind, right? And therefore, the anger is what I am. But you see, the assumption is that I'm different, you see. Now, that's part of the concealment. You see, you're saying the body is all stirred up, and that is the anger. But the anger affects the whole process of the mind, and the mind has in fact stirred it up, so it's all one process. I mean, that's what we're saying to show where the trouble is, that the assumption is that it's not one process.
Yeah, that is what or perhaps all of us have learned from the culture. Right. I am angry means my mind is angry.
But it also means my body is disturbed.
Body is disturbed, but it is not that important.
Yeah, but it is important. That's it. You see, it is of crucial importance.
Could we say that the problem is that we put all our energy and understanding trying to... There's this mind that's stirring up the body, and we put our energy in trying to resolve the stirring up of the body. If we went to the other side and tried to discover why the mind gets upset and stirs up the body. I mean, psychology is always trying to get you to calm your mind down so that your body be calmed down, or medicine is trying to get you to calm your body down. But what about... See, there's an input someplace that starts this whole thing up.
Well, the input is the false assumptions about the self, you see. The assumption which identifies the self with the effect of some thought on the body.
That's the root rather than...
That is the root, but it's so tied up with the emotional disturbance which makes the thought not straight, so that you can't just will to change it, right?
Right. Will is one of the problems.
Yeah. You can't just choose or decide to change all this.
I've tried it, it doesn't work.
But I mean, I think you can see it can't work, right?
Right.
I mean, from this structure, it's visible that it cannot possibly work.
Is it ever possible, at a time when you're angry or full of fear, is it ever possible to just be quiet?
Only by not, you see, the point is by not resisting the anger or the fear. But you see, as long as you have that separation, then the resistance, apparent separation, the resistance is inevitable. You see, if you are different from the fear, if you assume that you are different from the fear, then it follows logically that you could take action on the fear and try to control it. But you see, the thing that we are trying to control is controlling us.
Yes, but I don't mean control it. I mean to look at it very clearly.
Yes, if you can, you see, that's what we're trying to say, not with regard to fear, but with regard to the polarization.
Who's doing the looking? The looker is the lookee.
You see,
Who's
doing the looking? I was asking.
Well, that's a very good question. I think the question is, can you be quiet?
Take a tranquilizer and then inside.
Right.
No, then that will deaden the mind.
No.
Of course, one can be quiet.
If that's possible.
Of course.
Yeah, but can you be quiet in this polarization situation? You see, right? I mean, let's say this is the actual situation we have had here. You see, it's the same question with fear or with polarization, or with any of the other, with jealousy or rage or whatever it is. And all these emotions go too far because of the absolute necessity in the thought, and then they capture the thought, right?
In this body-mind analysis, you don't have that polarization, right?
Well, but polarization is only, we have it between the observer and the observed. You see, between mind and body. You see, saying, I am trying to...
As the way you explained it, there is no polarization.
Not really, but we have the assumption that there is, which is self-fulfilling.
This is what you said in another discussion. There is the individual dimension of life.
Yeah.
System. In that case, we talk about the social dimension and individual dimension of life. Can you extend it to the cosmic dimension?
Yes, we can, but you see, again, it will get us into another question, that there is this cosmic dimension having to do with the whole, and that may all be relevant, but you see, I think that we are sort of, that would get us into another point, it would take some time. Now, see, the thing is, if we have polarization, or if one is frightened, you see, there is this very similar situation going on. As if you're frightened, then there's resistance to to that fear, right? So there is an internal polarization of the assumption that there is this fear and there is me who is trying to keep it under control, right? See, it's a very similar structure, whether you have polarization between people or between the person who wants to control some feature of himself. See, there should be properly no polarization between mind and body. They're all one process. But we have it, right? Because of assumptions in culture.
Well, David, so how are you using the word mind?
Well, just simply in a general sense. I mean, whatever people see, the word mind has developed. See, the words mind and body have developed, and now, therefore, they constitute assumptions as to the way things are, right? That we have a mind and we have a body separate, right? And that assumption produces a sense of separation, which is self-fulfilling. Is that was clear what I mean?
But are you then going to say that somehow I don't think that you are saying that the mind is something separate from the body?
No, but I'm saying it's assumed to be separate in this process, and the assumption creates the impression that it is separate. Is that clear?
Well, not really.
Because according to the assumption, you perceive it. You see.
You've been using the word, at least in my memory. You were saying that the mind does this to the body.
Well, that's the way we customarily describe it. Now, actually, it's more complex. That there is a process of signosomatic and soma significant, saying there's a meaning which moves out to affect the physical state. The physical state has a further meaning which alters the thought process.
Now, dead body is still a body.
What?
A dead body.
No, but it's quite different. It
is still a body, so mind is gone. So there is a different, in that way, two processes.
Yeah, but it isn't, the body which is dead is something else. It's not a human being. You see, we're taking the case where the human being has consciousness. Now, the whole internal structure and order works at a level we call thought, which is more subtle, and the chemical level, the physical level, the level of tensions, and so on. Now, there is a flow between what is being thought and the whole state of the body, right? If the body is alive.
When you say being thought, are you using that to say being thought in the brain?
With thought going on in the brain, right? And the nervous system. Right?
But yet you still wouldn't want to replace the word mind with brain activity.
No, but see, this is a matter of language, that we have accepted the language of mind and body, and I was proposing a different language where mind and body are two aspects of one process, right? And therefore you can't really separate them. But the point to notice is that our whole culture is always separating them, and it's unconscious, right? When you have a confrontation, all that's forgotten, and you're back in the old pattern, right?
But don't scientists call it organism as a whole?
You can call it that, yes, the organism as a whole.
It doesn't divide the body from the mind.
Yeah, but automatically, if there's any emotional tension in people, it will be divided nevertheless, you see. The point is that the theoretical consideration of this is useful, but it cannot deal with it altogether, right?
Well, when we say that different word, it may change the thinking of the old thinking.
It doesn't, you see, when when the confrontation occurs, or when there is fear or hate or rage, that is all. You are no longer aware of all that. It's all pushed out, right?
Well, I feel now it's the whole thing. Now I don't
but
feel
we're not
just here or there or anywhere.
Yeah, but we're not in that situation. You see.
I'm at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in polarization. Okay, and I hear what you say. And so my usual activity of trying to solve this ceases.
What do you mean?
That normally in polarization, I say, well, that fellow's wrong, or I'm right in this, or I try to defend. I try to solve the problem of the upset in me through my mental activity.
Yes, it's happening automatically, right?
Right, okay. So, now it's been pointed out to me that this actually doesn't work.
Well, not only that, it isn't making any sense. It's really crazy, right?
But here I am in that situation, and that process is going on.
Yeah, that's the key point, that though it doesn't make sense, though it doesn't work, we go on with it. Right? Now, that really requires, isn't that extraordinary?
Now the question is, now what?
Now, this is not just your problem, but it is what is happening all through everything, right?
Well, if not the tranquilizer, what?
Well, that we're saying, to be able, see, the first step is, can we suspend this, right? And begin to look seriously at the other person's position, you see. You say you can't?
I don't personally think that's where to look.
Wow.
Well, it's just very personal, but my attention goes right into the body.
Well, you can stay there, but at the same time, the body is connected with a thought. It's not only the body, but it's the connection between the thought and the body.
The thought is implied in that body.
Yeah, but the other person's thought is your thought. You see, there are two thoughts going on, which we are saying this is mine and that's the other person's, but they're both going on inside you. You see, the same as Asian flu has nothing to do with Asia. It's going on inside the person who is ill, right?
No, but you see, when I hear that other person,
yeah,
apparently I'm not listening to that other person. I'm listening to my reaction to that other person. So it's really my own. I'm not listening.
Well, wait.
Okay.
You see, how can you not listen? How can you know you shouldn't listen unless you have listened?
Wait a minute.
Or why would you be angry if you hadn't heard something about it?
You see, somehow you must have become aware of that other person's thought and seen that it is a threat to your thought, right?
See, I've listened to some threat. Somehow, I'm not absorbing. I'm absorbing a threat, or I'm defending. I don't know how to put it. Somehow, it doesn't feel like I'm taking in what that other person's saying.
Well, that may be, but you must have taken it in to some extent at some level. You see,
Okay.
Suppose he had spoken in a language you didn't understand. You see, then he could have called you all sorts of insults, and you would have sat there quietly, right?
Okay.
So you have to take it in, right?
Okay, I don't think that that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm taking that in, and that becomes part of this. It's not differentiated from this nervous system. And if this nervous system has gotten very excited, I cannot continue to hear anything. So I personally feel that my attention should be on the excitation, not labeling it or trying to figure out whether I'm angry or whatever, but just actually to watch, to feel.
Yeah, but also what is causing the excitation?
Well, that's going to further the, that's getting into analyzing.
No, you see, to be aware of the cause. You see, the connection between the thought and the excitation. You see, if you don't see the cause of the excitation, then the brain is seeing it upside down, and it's going to treat it as independent.
But see, if you ask what the cause is on that particular issue,
Yeah.
you're going to have an endless number of
No,
issues
it's very.
to deal with.
It's,
So you've got to, I'm sorry.
it's not endless.
Well, I feel if you could actually see what the cause is as a general cause, that this being is feeling threatened, that would be the cause, not the particular conversation.
Well, but I think it's the particular thing the person is saying is the cause. You see, that he has said something which has excited you, right?
Yes, but in someone else it wouldn't, is what you're saying. But basically, this feeling is threatened. I don't know why.
Yeah, but it's threatened by something that he said. That threat wasn't, when you were sitting quietly, the whole process was quiescent until he said something.
Okay, you're saying something now. Right? And I am responding.
Yeah.
And I am putting up a resistance. Okay? It's not that you particularly are saying those particular words may be affecting a particular condition in me. But if I were to try to analyze this particular one, then life would be an endless series of analyzing why.
I'm not suggesting analysis. I'm suggesting to be aware of how the word has produced.
The word?
The word has produced the reaction. The word and what it means has produced the reaction.
Maybe I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah. Well, you see, if somebody insults you and calls you by a very bad name,
yes,
you immediately react, right?
Yes.
If he had insulted you in another language, quietly, you would have not reacted, right?
Yes.
Therefore, the word and what it means have produced that reaction.
Could I just say one more thing? I feel it's not the particular word, but a word is threatening an image.
That's what it means.
That's what it means. Okay, so another language would not threaten the image. But if I'm concerned that he called me ugly or stupid or something like that, if one person calls me stupid, I'd react. Another person calls me ugly, I might react. So it's not the particular, it's just the fact that the image, maybe we're saying the same thing and I'm not understanding you. It's the general fact that a word that would threaten this image is articulated, and I am in reaction to that.
Yeah, it isn't making sense. You say, how can an image be threatened? You see, if we said the television image was threatened and it reacted, you see, you wouldn't believe it, right? You see, is it just an image? I mean, what do you mean by an image?
Well, I realize it has, maybe I'm taking too much time. But
No, it's important. What do you really mean by an image?
You mean an assumption about yourself?
Well, I have a conjured up picture of this person, and I would imagine, and I'm just saying this from assumption, it has a particular neurological setup in my body. I'm just assuming that's just a jump, okay? And someone comes along and says something that's different from what I want this image to be. I don't know where else to go from there.
Yeah, I'm saying, look, if you have an image, it comes from some assumption about yourself, saying, I assume that I am really a good person, beautiful, competent, or whatever, right?
Yes.
And that creates a good feeling in the body, which gradually you get used to, so you don't know it's there. Right?
So that's the bodily
image. That's the bodily image of that assumption, right?
Okay.
Right?
No problem with that.
Right? Mm-hmm. All right. Now then, somebody else. But then, in that process, you have a concealment of the fact that this image has been produced by an assumption.
Right.
In other words, the brain is also thinking this image was not produced by an assumption, but it is me who feels so good. If you didn't think that way, it would be no use doing it at all, right? Isn't that clear? If you said, I have cooked up this feeling by thinking that I am good.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, gotcha.
So you then have a concealment of the fact that it has been cooked up, right, somehow. And therefore you say the body now feels good, and that's good, right? Mm-hmm. Now then, but you have a mechanism whereby an assumption can slip over into a feeling while the process is concealed, right? You have set up a mechanism.
Yes.
that mechanism is not restricted to nice assumptions. Any assumption will go through that mill, right?
Of course.
So along comes another assumption. Somebody else has made another assumption about you. You have picked it up, whether you like it or not, and it has slipped through that machine and has produced a bad feeling.
Yes.
So it's the other person's assumption, which has, although you said you're not taking it up, you did take it up.
Yes.
And it became part of you, right?
Yes.
Therefore,
Okay.
is that clear?
Yeah. I'm following you.
Yes. So therefore, because we have set up cooked up a process whereby an assumption can slip over into a feeling and be concealed that that's happening, that is a trap, because we think that will work for nice assumptions, but it also works for for unpleasant assumptions.
Okay, so I say to myself, this assumption came into this body and it's reacting to it. What does that do to the actual physical reaction?
Well, at the moment, nothing. You see, I'm trying to say we're merely sort of getting some understanding of it. You see that?
Oh, okay.
All right, now, what was that? What?
Could we suspend our polarities just for a moment? I'm running out of time.
Oh. You see, the point is that there's a process going on there which culture has built up, right? An experience, saying that there's a trap there, that we are in the habit of making assumptions about ourselves and then concealing that and getting good feelings out of it, right? Mm-hmm. Or else letting other people make assumptions about us and it comes through in the same way. If your friend makes the same assumption saying you're very competent, and it comes through, goes right through the machine and produces good feeling.
Yeah.
You see, so you have set that up and say, that's nice because now I have a nice source of good feelings. But along comes somebody else who says you're incompetent. That slips through the machine too, and because it's been concealed, you don't see it happening. Mm-hmm. And then along comes the bad feeling, right? Mm-hmm. But then you say, I would like to separate these bad feelings from the good feelings, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't because the same machine produces both, right?
Yes.
Right?
I understand that.
Yes, so that's really where the problem is, you see. But then, since I've concealed this whole thing, it has concealed itself, therefore I don't even see that all that's happening, and I say I've got a problem to get good feelings and get rid of bad feelings, right?
So what you're saying is that this really has to be seen what you're talking about before anything else can happen. So you have to really see the actuality.
Well, that would be the best thing, to see this actuality, you see. That.
But that's mental. I mean, it's if there's an insight, but it has to be a lot more than an idea.
Yeah, I mean, an idea is like a map pointing to the country,
right,
you see.
Right.
But then the country has to be seen. Now, you see, you have to see inside of yourself the connection between the thought, and it's anybody. See, we have all sorts of assumptions that are getting in the way. One is that this thought belongs to that person and not to me, you see. But the minute I hear it, it's my thought. It slips through that machine, just as if I had produced it, right? And in fact, I often ask other people to say nice things, or I sort of indicate to them that they ought to be saying nice things, so that it can slip through the machine and pleasantly stimulate the body, right? So now, therefore, then along comes somebody who says things that are not nice, and it stimulates the body in an unpleasant way, right? And then I say, I have a problem. How can I separate these pleasant stimulations from the unpleasant ones? Because I can't, right? Right. But then I try somehow, by being not straight about it, to separate it, right? To act to try to relieve the tension by saying all sorts of things, saying that person is jealous of me, or and so on. It doesn't count what he says, and so on. You see, so there's a whole process of self-deception. Now you see, that's all happening with fear, or with anger, or jealousy, or rage, or confrontation, right?
Yeah.
And that, as long as that goes on, really we can't make it proceed any further, really. We can talk endlessly about all sorts of subjects, and it will all go into this mill and get chewed up, right? Mm-hmm. So now, therefore, we're saying any example is a good one. You see, as an individual, you can look at fear, or rage, or whatever, or jealousy, or whatever it is, if you can manage to do it, and you'll be all right. You see, you can see through this. In the group, we can look through the problems that arise in the group, such as confrontation. It's the same mechanism. See, you have had an assumption, I don't know about what, saying, what was the one we were working on?
I think you were going to say that seeing that mechanism, the machine, as well as formation of that anger or whatever, is very important. When you see that process, causality, that serves the purpose rather than dividing good and bad feelings. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm saying, but it's very, you see, so if we can actually see that at work, but to see that at work, we not only have to see the good and bad feelings, we must see the thoughts with which they are connected. It's only in the connection that you see the key point. You see, if you see the good and bad feelings by themselves, the body is assuming, the mind is assuming that they are originating in the body, and you've got to, fix it. If you see only the thought, then you don't see that they're producing good and bad feelings, right? You have to see that one is indissolubly connected with the other, right? But the whole concealment mechanism is to prevent you from seeing that. The whole notion of the ego is to prevent that from being seen. The ego would vanish if that were seen, right? The ego as we know it, right? Because the ego is supported by that mechanism of not seeing this point. Do you see what I'm driving at there?
No, can you make that?
You see, there may be a true self, who knows, right? But we have a kind of false self, right? Which we call, for convenience, calling the ego. Now, why should there be, what is a false self, you see? What could it mean, you see? Something untrue is going on. You see, I'm saying that in this mechanism between thought and feeling, you could see it. You see that thought stirs up feelings, right? It's untrue. That connection between them is concealed. We're not aware that thought does stir up feelings. You have a thought, a minute later you have a feeling, and you don't know that the thought has stirred it up. Huh?
But one moment, I mean, I don't know if this is relevant, but is it not also possible that the body itself would generate feelings?
Yes, that would be real feelings. The most elementary is to say you feel good or you have a toothache or whatever. You may have very subtle feelings, and they may be very important. But the difficulty is they're confused with these feelings that are mechanically stirred up from thought.
Are you saying that the ego is the thoughts about ourselves that create the good feelings?
Yes. That whole process is the ego.
The whole process, even the thoughts that create
the
bad feelings?
Yeah, because without the thought it wouldn't work, you see. Then the feeling...
I'm saying, is it the thought that creates the bad feelings and the thought that creates the good
That's
feelings?
right. All that's the ego. The ego is supported by the concealment process. None of this would work, would have any attraction whatsoever, if the connection between thought and feeling were not concealed. You see, if you know that you are stirring up good feelings by thinking I am a very fine person, it will have very little satisfaction in that, right? You know.
And seeing that causal process is the solution. It brings up the solution to the problem.
Yes, but seeing it in actuality, not just abstractly, but seeing it as the tensions are there, seeing the tension which is compelling, urging thought to distort, right?
It happens to,
yes.
It happens to one person of these two, okay, then the other person remains the same.
No, I think this is the point about the dialogue. If we really do it right, it's happening to both at the same time. You see, this is a key point, that my thought is your thought. You see, it's everybody's thought. In this dialogue, whatever is happening is felt by everybody and seen by everybody if we're really alert, right? Now, see, I'm saying that when that whole operation of the thought process and the feelings takes place in everybody, it doesn't belong to anybody. It's like the virus. Once it's in you are the one who's reproducing it. So this virus enters everybody, right? Everybody. Some people, are not deeply affected by it, and they may sort of see what it means, and then they can come in to sort of say things that help. But then the two people confronting each other, each one is undergoing the same process. So in this intense communication, it is possible for both people to see it together. You see that it's really one process. Everything is both public and private at the same time. Is that clear what I mean? That the thing, not only the thoughts, but the feelings are publicly displayed in the attitude of the body and the way the voice goes and so on, right? And everybody feels them to one degree or another. And everybody can, in principle, if he's alert, will see what the thought is behind it, right?
A good example would be when we all laugh together.
Yeah, that's right. That shows that everybody saw the point, right? And everybody felt tension, and everybody relieved it, right? So, you see, that's this assumption of separation we're questioning now, saying, are we all that separate? You see, I mean, in the mind, they say the body is separate, but is the mind really separate? Well, whatever we mean by the word mind, I mean, you're just using it in the colloquial sense, right? Is the thought process, is the significance process separate between us, right? You know, or isn't it one common flow of meaning, which we call dialogue, which gets broken up into a lot of separate polarized meanings?
What can you explain? When we were first talking about meaning, it seemed to me that we invent these meanings because we are separate.
It's the other way around. Our separation comes because the culture has produced these meanings over thousands of years, millions maybe. You see, the mind develops into separate minds. You see, I like to give this analogy again to the ballet dance, which we may have them all functioning from a common pool of meaning. Now we can imagine each one breaks into two groups, and each one starts to do an independent dance. Then it could break up. Each one could break up again and again. So each individual was doing his own thing, right? And you see, that's the sort of picture that now it's possible to have a common pool of meaning and being in this group, or it's possible to break up into two polarized groups, or 4 or 5 or whatever, or even or more. So common mind is a common meaning. That meaning is action and being. And if we went to the cosmic level, just simply to raise that question, we could ask a question that's just in the mind. Is there a cosmic meaning? Is the same as to say, is there a cosmic mind, right? That is there a cosmic meaning which is active in the sense that our own group meaning or individual meaning is active, right? We can't answer that in just 2 words, but it shows that the whole connection. Now, but if we don't get the individual and group meaning clear, I think our mind will not be orderly enough to really be sensitive to the cosmic meaning.
So are you saying at least for some times there is cosmic meaning?
There may be time from time to time. And as our mind becomes more orderly and clear and sensitive, then the cosmic meaning comes into it more, you see, now. So, but if it's all broken up into conflict inside and between us, then it won't.
Right now you don't think that it is continuous?
Well, ultimately it may. See, we would have to speculate about that. You see, I would like to say this is merely a proposal,
yes, I know.
Which we could explore, which I think is reasonable, and but it is very important to have the individual meaning and the group meaning fairly orderly, and therefore in that cosmic meaning there can arise this creativity, right? Because the mind is sensitive, the individual and group mind is sensitive and free, capable of free play to respond to the cosmic meaning.
That free play is creativity.
The free play is the condition is the necessity for creativity. That if we say creativity would originate from a creative intelligence, but the mind must be free to play, to respond, right? If it's rigid, has rigid necessity, unyielding, then it can't, and it will become more like an inanimate object, which does not respond, right? So the more rigid we are, the more we become like machines and inanimate objects, and the less sensitive and so on.
Like resonance.
Yeah. So therefore all this work is all one. You see that the individual mind, the socio-cultural mind, and the cosmic mind, it's all different aspects of one. And if I'd like to make a sort of a thing that if we say there are 3 dimensions, you see, if you take a figure, a line is in one dimension, you see a plane is in two and the solid is in three. Now, there might be some objects which have so little of the third dimension they're rather flat, you see. And some objects would get so narrow they become almost linear. So, you see, if the mind could then get stuck either being flat or linear, very restricted, you see, but it could open up into other dimensions, right? But if we don't bring in all of these dimensions, we will either be flat or linear.
I would like to, when you're just talking about free play, some perception occurred to me, which was another way of putting free play is a movement without motive.
That's the same thing. You see, it's a motive restricts the play, right?
Motive is going from here to there.
But it's also unyielding. You see, it restricts, right?
It's a resistance.
Yeah.
Motive is resistance. And free play would be as if the flow that is the essence of it.
Yeah, it's all similar, you see, so there's similar ways of putting it now. But we come back that I think that the socio-cultural dimension has not been given proper attention, generally speaking. That we have sort of taken for granted that all these tensions are going to arise when people try to talk to each other. And that we really somehow have to deal with them, you see. But the reason why I have emphasized dialogue is that it really has gotten very little attention thus far. And it is a crucial point that if one of the dimensions of the human being is not is restricted, then that's not enough, right?
What are some examples of the first and the last that has been emphasized?
Well, the individual dimension, for example, we can discuss. If you get angry, you can look into your own disorder, you see, by being aware of it, right? By observing it and so on. You see, that has been discussed, in many ways. The cosmic has been discussed in many ways, you see. But, you see, I don't think that a lot of attention has been given to the socio-cultural dimension, that we really have to, it's not enough just to talk about it, we have got to do something about it, right? We can only, as an individual, you can see where you are producing disorder in relationship as you watch the tension of the body when it comes up in relationship, right? Now, but then if you do that as an individual and then suddenly you get into a discussion and you can't do it, you see, if you get into a group and you find it runs away, then it's not good enough, right? You see that a different order of problem arises when there's a large group where all sorts of socio-cultural assumptions become operative, which are not very strong when one or two people are around. And therefore, you'll find that people can be carried away into this situation. And it not only prevents our civilization from working, but it will prevent us from being open to all the dimensions. Right?
So what you're saying is there may be a special value in people coming together in groups of some number, and seeing if the things are...
In the same way that there's value as an individual in looking at these things and being aware of. You see, the problem is very similar when there's confrontation. You have this tension in the body. You are not aware of how it's connected with how you think or how the other... You see, the new dimension is you're not aware of how it's connected with what the other person is thinking, right? You may say, okay, I'll look at my thoughts, but it's the other person's thoughts that is producing the tension too. Because they're immediately your thoughts, right? What?
Always I tend to think that is where the problem is.
Yes, but the other person and me are the same in this context, you see.
Not on my side, but problem is there.
Yes, but then I project it out and say he's making trouble for me. But in fact, he becomes me, and I become two people making trouble for myself, right?
Isn't this rooted in the point you made yesterday about what we are as an individual to a large extent is idiosyncrasies, which come from really a common pool. So maybe this is connected to the generative source, at least at the sociocultural level.
Yes, yeah, that's so that we are having this common pool. We look to the common pool for all sorts of thoughts to comfort us. And when thoughts come around which make us uncomfortable, we have a problem, right? We say, how can we get rid of those and keep these? But the machine takes both, right? There's no way out of it, right? You have set up a machine to turn those thoughts into good feelings, but it will turn the opposite thoughts into bad feelings.
Which will then try to turn the bad feelings into good feelings.
It'll try, but then that'll be a hopeless confusion, right?
So you're saying the thing to do is then go a step further and ask why the other person feels that way. Try and see where he's coming from.
That's a good point, yes. That you then begin to say not only where he's coming from, but can I feel the way I'm actually feeling the way the other person is feeling, but I'm saying it's him that's feeling it and not me, right? But in fact, all the feelings that I feel are going on in me, right? So,
saying then, can I become the other person?
Yes, can I let the other person's feelings unfold in me, in the same way suspending it as I suspend my own, right?
But if you are concentrating on what the other person is thinking and feeling, then you must automatically suspend your own.
Yeah, well,
energy is then being expended in that direction rather than inward.
Yes, it goes together. You suspend your own, and you're also letting the other person's feelings come in, but suspending those too. You see, not letting them go all the way. And then you can say, here I'm holding two sets of thoughts and feelings together in tension. Right? And out of that tension, something creative can arise.
We've institutionalized all this stuff in society what is sin? But holding two different separate concepts in your mind at the same time. What is guilt? I mean, we've taken all this simple thing you're talking about and made it the structure of society.
Well, because the reason is that we have concealed what's going on. You see, the mind conceals the fact that the thought and the feeling are part of one process, right? And then says, I've got to produce the good thoughts. I've tried to separate the good thoughts from the good feelings from the bad ones, and the good thoughts from the bad ones. Right? But you see, once this mechanism exists, they cannot be separated. See, therefore, that's why we have to say, don't judge, right? You see, the minute you judge, this thought is good and that thought is bad, you're lost. What?
Is that empathy, what you described?
It would be a kind of empathy. Yes, that's another word for it. You see that but you can see the difficulty in this empathy whenever you feel yourself to be attacked, right? It's easy to be empathetic when somebody agrees with you, or else you're sorry for the person or something. But if somebody says something that threatens you, then that's a much more serious.
Could you restate that again? If this is a key thing you're saying, and how you filter out or don't filter out, but the bad does not get through to make you react in this emotional.
Well, you see, essentially you have to say the good also doesn't make you react, you see.
Yes.
You see, but people don't want to one doesn't want to give that up. You say, one wants to say, I want the good reactions to continue, but get rid of the bad ones. That's the assumption. But see, the mechanism is such that once you set it up to produce the good reactions, it cannot avoid producing the bad reactions. Therefore, the mechanism must be dismantled.
So you should look at good feelings that are produced in you just as much as looking at bad.
Yeah, they can be very deceptive, you see. Yeah.
So the question arises here. Now, listening to Krishnamurti, I thought that this sort of thing can happen at the end of thought, ending of thought. But here, you are explaining it is in the thought process still.
Yes, you see, this is a matter of bringing order into life, right? Into ordinary life. You see that you see, I think what he says, which sort of goes over a great deal of ground at once, is to bring order into your daily life is really the first step, right? But then, without that order in your daily life, you really can't see these other things. Now, but this order I'm suggesting has to be in our communication as well, in large groups too, you see, and especially if you're going to set up groups to do anything. Yeah. And see, so, but the same questions are arising. Essentially, the question of the observer and the observed is arising, the one I've described. Right? That you see, the observer, that there's the assumption that the mind is observing the feelings or the thoughts, alternatively, and but that the observer is independent of all that is being observed. Is that? As it is in looking at the chair. But it is a false assumption, not merely incorrect, but false. Untrue, you see. And therefore, yes, the assumption is that but in fact, if the observed happens to be all these feelings, whether good or bad, the thought process is profoundly affected by them and to be untrue and self-deceptive. If the feeling is good, then the thought process wants to hold it, and it will distort everything to defend the good feeling. If the feeling is bad, it will defend it and by getting rid of it or whatever. But so the point is that the observer is the observed. You see, whatever you call the observer is in fact controlled by the observed.
Is the observer and the observed the judgment itself?
Yeah, the judgment is the observer, but the judgment is also the observed, because the judgment is what has produced the very thing.
It's actually it's the like and dislike is the observer and the observed itself too.
Yes, but the observer as judgment produces the whole tension of the body, which could then become, for the moment, the observed. But that observed is affecting the next judgment, right? In a false way. And it gets lost in, and it contains all this concealment and so on. You see, you could go into why this has all developed, so and make some reasonable speculations, but we really, of course, the time is coming to finish, but let's leave that go and just say the fact is that this has happened, this has come about over thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And this is the principal, not only problem of human society, but it's also the principal thing which prevents life from having meaning, right? See, if all this is going on, what could life mean? You see, you're lost in something false. What is false and untrue can have no meaning, right?
There's no being.
What?
There's no being in it.
What has no meaning has no being, right?
What is implied in all this, then, is that if this dialogue takes place, then this dismantling you're speaking of.
Yeah, both individual. I want to say that if we would work on both individually and together, it would become far more effective, you see. If you were watching, say, if we were to meet, let's say, once a week, just for the sake of discussion, but meanwhile you were watching this thing in your particular relationships, and then we came together. You see, the combination of the individual and the socio-cultural would have a very powerful effect.
Isn't that something that's going on right now, in the sense that if, as an individual, we're paying attention to the process, but not necessarily commenting on it in a personal way.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Because that seems to spoil something.
Yes.
So what we're actually focusing is this larger context, at the same time focusing on the other. It's like that occurring.
Yes, I see, in this context, if there is a confrontation, each one of us can feel the tension of that confrontation and understand that what's going on in the confrontation is essentially the same, though perhaps more intense.
Do you think there's some value in joining a group to continue something like this?
Well, yes, in principle there should be. You see, now that raises the question, you see, of how to do it, though, you see. And I think that this would require somebody to not exactly lead it, but to get it started.
Would this person have to have some kind of unusual skill?
No, not unusual, but at least he should understand the principles and have some skill. You see that eventually that person, he should work in such a way as to work himself out of a job, right? To make himself unnecessary, right? But to try not to lead too much, but to sort of use more hints and suggestions and so on. Most of the energy being supplied by the people. He would take part on the same basis for the most part as others are, right? Now, I think that I don't think it could get started without that. You see, that's my opinion. I mean, I carefully considered I think it would be valuable if it could be done. But of course, you may find that you sort of founder on, all these problems.
If several people get some sense of this, then all the burden isn't on one person.
Yeah.
And they back him up, and that thing of becoming a leader and so on doesn't need arise.
You might use even several people might try to take this role. You see, it doesn't have to be one. I think that it's like saying it's an art, and if somebody has some sort of skill or ability in this art, he can help get things started, you see. But the others are learning the art, and therefore eventually that person becomes unnecessary in that special role, right, for that group of people.
Could I ask a question? There are a lot of us who know people that are going to come in 2 more weeks. Is there would you have any suggestions about our communication with those people?
Oh, I don't know.
We don't have any.
You see, all these things all go differently. The next one may go very differently.
So they could have no expectation?
No. You see, the next one may take a very different form. For all we know, we might discuss order and creativity.
It might contaminate the process. You said too much. It might contaminate the process. I mean, the virus might start to work on them.
Yeah, it's best to say nothing. I think that we really don't know how it should go.
We do hope that you'll come back and do this again.
Maybe you'll be doing it next time.
Yeah, I mean that would be many others should be doing it. Well, you want to say something? Fini.